Valentina, welcome to the lockdown sessions. Good morning, how are you?
Guten Morgen. I'm great. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Listen, we were just talking a little bit offline, and of course, you're coming to the end of work for a while because in about 6, 7 weeks, I think, you're going to be producing the first of your children.
Yes.
Wow, okay.
Hopefully.
So, pregnancy during lockdown, that's probably a whole different episode.
I don't think you had that before.
No, we've not. Definitely, it's a first. It's a first. But before we dive into what it's like to be a pregnant woman during lockdown and being a mum, actually, the reason why we've been connected was through a mutual friend and colleague. You've been heading up organizational design, and as an ex-leadership consultant and coach, you've worked at Doka for 5+ years. And I thought it would be really cool for someone who's been involved in organizational change to get you on to these sessions to do some reflections. And we always start in the same way, and then we just jam and see where it goes. So just relax into it. But my first question, especially with your org design hat on, because so many organizations have been going through changes, there's restructure after restructure anyway, before the pandemic. And then suddenly the pandemic hits and restructure and reorg becomes even more relevant. I'm wondering, what have you been observing when you look out at people and you look at the working population? Like, what have you seen move and change over the last, 9 months now, right? What have been your big observations and learnings?
It's crazy how long it's been already. Yeah. Thinking back to when it all started, I think there were two patterns of reacting to the crisis from an organizational point of view. It's like some companies really relying on what they knew, immediately starting cost-cutting programs, immediately starting increasing reporting, looking at their KPIs, restructuring, cutting down, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, there were companies that said, like, this is gonna change a lot. And this is also an opportunity for us to see how our business could change and our working style could change. So what's in for us in terms of virtual teams, virtual collaboration, what can we try out new in terms of customer experience? And so I think this were two ways to go. Either the one like, okay, let's do it as we know we handled different crises in the past before. And others who were like, there's so much transformative energy, just dive into it and see what's coming out. And that was something that I could experience in the last month or so. And I think there were, due to this crisis, there were a lot of things that people had to try out, never thought were possible. And I think we had that before, but it's astonishing for me how often we discussed about, do you have to go to a certain place? Do you have to travel to Singapore or to Dubai to host a workshop? Right. And I think it opened up opportunities also for virtual teams, because we have a lot of dislocated teams in many companies that are facing this challenge before Corona and now with Corona. And I think we have a lot of new tools and sensibility and awareness for what makes those teams work. And yeah.
No, I love how you talk about that transformative energy. I read this morning how Eric Yuan, the CEO of Zoom, won like Business Person of the Year from Time. I'm sure the US president will be annoyed that Biden and Kamala Harris won People of the Year. That will be really frustrating, I think. But yeah, so, head of a tech company, that totally got us all collaborating, and not just people in business, right? Like my parents in their 70s have their Zoom accounts, and they send out little links to their friends to have their chit chats and their drinks when they sort of meet at 5 o'clock for a little cocktail. So that I love the way you called it transformative energy and leveraging that. Tell me a bit more about that, because not everybody's comfortable with transformation, right? Transformation is uncomfortable, actually.
Yeah, it is. It is, and I think there is change that you can plan, and I think that's the more normal way of companies to handle it, like a new CEO stepping in or a management team setting up a new strategy, and then you make your plans, you try to communicate your plans, you try to get people on board, and you just implement step by step what your plans are and figure out if your plans work or not. Hopefully they do.
Yeah.
And with this, and we've been talking about the VUCA world for so long, and I think this Corona crisis is just like, okay, that's it now.
Yeah, everyone now understands what it means to live in the VUCA world. For sure.
No one has an idea how this thing is going to turn out. No one. I mean, people try. And if we think back to March, where I personally thought, okay, in 2 weeks this will be over, and we can go back to more normal. I mean, I had plans for summer, so how could this change?
Right, yeah, that was denial, actually, Valentina, I think.
So I think this is the change that comes forced from the outside, from the surroundings, where we're not prepared, and which is much more scary because we're not having it under control. And I think that's really hard for leaders in this situation to steer through a crisis that is absolutely not under control.
Right.
And some people react with trying to find out more or look more at the numbers and trying to get more reports and trying to get more sense of control and more stability into something that is just so unstable. Every new lockdown will change the situation. We have no idea how the economy will look like next year. And so I think this is really, really a big challenge for people managing this transformation, managing this change, and holding their company alive.
You're right. If you and I had been chatting last December and I'd have said to you, hey, what do you think the world will look like in 12 months? Neither of us would have been able to even get anywhere close to imagining what we would feel 12 months later after literally 9 months shut in our homes. And I know some people have been moving around, and obviously there are frontline workers and essential workers, and for them life has just carried on just with added risk. I think what makes that whole VUCA understanding so interesting is, and not many people know, but VUCA came from a military concept, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it was the American Army during the Cold War that was looking at contingency planning for their soldiers behind enemy lines. Yeah. So if you're in a VUCA world, you need A, B, C, D, E plans because it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. For most of us working every day, like the most volatile thing that would happen is our train would be late. The most uncertain thing would be, whether or not somebody's going to turn up on time for a meeting. The most complex things we dealt with were probably contracts at work. And when it comes to ambiguity, depending on your preference, well, again, ambiguity is that kind of unknown and slightly unclear and not really, it's a little bit foggy. But now, in fact, I got a little bit bored on LinkedIn of seeing VUCA appear like every week.
Everywhere. And everybody's explaining it, and I feel like now I get it.
Yeah, but you and I both work in an OD and an L&D environment, right? So we've been playing with these terms for for a long time, and I don't want it to sound like patronizing. It's not meant to, but it was the same at the beginning when everyone everyone was talking about virtual teams, how to work in virtual teams, how to work remotely. We were running webinars on these topics. But then I started to see, like, literally every day, people posting and posting and posting. So, and the reason why I say that is I'm kind of interested from an org design point of view. What are the things you then look at that something like a pandemic, the environment it suddenly thrusts upon you and your people, working them from home, furloughing them, not letting everyone be part of. How does org design take all of that into account? So, like, truly, how do you work in a VUCA world when, as you talked before, normally with change, we have Drucker and Kotter to help us with our stages. All of a sudden, there aren't any. So what did you focus on with your people?
Kotter also let go of the stages and said it's all coming together at once. It's not so controllable. But I think it's about a lot of letting go of this pyramid structure, about this one thinking that some people on the top can have everything under control.
Right.
Because especially in companies that are bigger and that are located on different continents, different sites on the globe, it's just, there's so much change and so much information going on, and how can one person or some people at the top just know everything?
Right.
I think it's not possible. And even if you get reports back and you have your steering instruments, this will all have a delay. And I think it's important to build more flexible units on the ground, just from an organizational perspective now, who know what they're doing and have the liberty and the accountability to do so.
Right.
To really sense into what is needed in the market right now, to follow certain principles, to follow a certain purpose and a strategy, but to be able to take decisions, to move forward quickly and to adapt.
Do you think we're good at adapting?
Not yet.
Right.
I think this is it's a different paradigm, it's a different logic, I think, that evolves here, and that some companies are trying out. And I think it changes also a lot for leaders, because it's different to what they learned and different to how they got good in their jobs. Because they are expected to know a lot, they are expected to take decisions, they're expected to help, they're expected to grow their teams, they're expected to have the vision, they have a lot of expectations on their heads.
Yeah, and also now all you hear about is, you have to be vulnerable, and show vulnerability, and it's like, well, actually, yes, really important element, but there's got to be other elements involved with that. You can't just expect someone who's never been vulnerable before to suddenly start being vulnerable. But to your point, the world is so different, the landscape is so uncharted, that for most of us, we're just trying to get through week by week.
Yeah.
Let alone starting to engage in emotions and other areas that, will really make us uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And on the topic of vulnerability, yes, I do think people need to show, or leaders need to show vulnerability. The question is also how, because I think it can throw off people's expectation. Because what I also experience is that people are looking to their leaders and saying, like, get me through this shitty phase, get me through, find me the answer, help me.
Yeah.
And I will trust you, but please help me through this. And I think that's a really, really difficult thing to balance. How honest can I say that I'm also facing difficulties in assessing the situation and taking the right decisions, and that I'm also struggling maybe and at the same time giving a bit of certainty and confidence and help to my people.
I'm with you. I posted this week actually on inclusive leadership, because for me this is the approach we should be taking as leaders. And by inclusivity, it's about, you know, really engaging with everybody at the same level. Because yes, I'm the leader, I will help drive results and I'll keep pushing you, don't worry, I'll motivate, coach, inspire, model everything, you know, I'll do all the enabling bit. But at the same time, if I don't create an inclusivity around the way I lead, which means I have to get comfortable with maybe sharing, do you know what, I had a really rubbish day on Tuesday. I just woke up, I was feeling off center. The kids were driving me mad. It's dark when I wake up. It's dark when I go home from the office, in the garden. It's like everything is. But when you start talking it out loud, what I realize is it's all first world problems that I'm worried about, right? I'm complaining how it's dark when I go to work and it's dark when I get home. Great, I've got a job. And then when I look a bit deeper, I have to go to the office in the garden. I've actually got a separate office, right? This is not right. Exactly, right? And there I am complaining and moaning, oh, it's dark. Actually, they're all real first world problems. And I think what it's taught me, so one of my key observations and learnings has been over these 9 months, reminding me of perspective. Really recognizing how to be grateful for what I have.
Yeah.
I wonder, as a change specialist, as someone who spent, you know, a decade working with leaders, are we grateful enough in the leadership space? Or are we always searching for the next big win, the next team promotion? Where does gratitude sit?
It sounds like a rhetorical question, though.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to make a note, because maybe that will be the title of our podcast.
But I do think we're in a business environment where it's always about more performance, more money, more speed, more, and we're coming out of this not enough yet. And I think I really like what you're saying about this gratitude part, because being aware of what we're actually really grateful for and what we value in life and what our capabilities are, the resources we have, the strength we have, the privileges we have. I think this will help us move forward into this unknown territory that comes up in the next weeks and months.
Yeah. You know, when so there are 2 kids who live in this house, right? Well, not now, they're at uni. But to have our 21 and 19-year-old come back and live at home for 4 months, I was so grateful for, because at that age they've gone, right? They're not interested in living with their parents. Oh my God, it's like they're not interested at all. But suddenly here was this horrible world situation which brought them back home. Now, yes, there were moments when they drove me mad. And they eat so much. You'll find this out. You'll find this out very soon. And you'll be the provider of food in a completely different way then. But
I hate cooking. So.
Right. You'll learn. But you'll learn. So this idea for me of gratitude, actually, it goes right to the core of what's helped me through these moments.
Yeah.
Taking a moment in the day, and I can turn around, I've got a window behind me, and I can look into the fields and I can listen to birds, I can hear the wind. At the beginning, I was just grateful for not hearing the planes flying overhead. I found myself being grateful for how silent it was. And I think maybe, you know, in business, of course, it's super important. We drive the number, we drive results, it measures everything, you know. Not always the most important thing, but it is always measured. And no business I've worked with has like diminished their number because of the pandemic. So
Not to my knowledge.
right, so we're still driving everything. So when you look out at leaders, do you see them changing? Like, or are they being dragged, kicking and screaming into the VUCA world of uncertainty?
Mhm. There's not a yes or no answer to that. I see some people or some leaders who are craving for normality,
Mhm.
and they're like, let's do our best so that things run normal and not be influenced by the pandemic. I see, or I talk to leaders who say maybe also they have been, how do you say when you're not holding your position, but you're getting another one lower down, lower the hierarchy? Yeah.
Yeah.
And they say, yeah, I was a victim of this restructuring process, but actually I can see value in that because I spend more time with my family. I have time to take care of myself. I experienced so many different things now. So this is something that I see as well. But I think the most part is still struggling because, and I think this is not something that where I have a final a fixed point of view yet, or is like this is the answer. But I think it has a lot to do with our expectations and following expectations that we have to managers, and I think they're doing their best to live up to these expectations of holding stability, showing the way, leading the way, creating stability, creating a vision, and helping their teams. And I think that's
Yeah, it's interesting even when you say that, because immediately I start thinking about all the political leaders who've been driving, globally through the pandemic, and they're not adopting the kind of behaviors that you and I are discussing here, right? They're vacillating backwards and forwards. There's populism. There's not always a democratic approach to things. We say follow the science in most countries, but put 3 scientists in a room, you have at least 5 opinions.
yes, probably.
So, I think there's a challenge. Okay, so look, let's change away from the pandemic a bit. I want to talk about people with you. You have a good insight into the way people change, and you've driven change in organizations. How do you see people adopting to change? Because I think that will play a part in today's world as well. How we adopt to new normals or whatever it is, just what it will be. What's your observation of the speed and capacity people have to change?
We say depend on the severity or the intensity of the change, because you can see it say like the smoothest way of changing is learning, and where you step by step include certain habits or learn something new and change on the way, which is probably the smoothest and the most where people can follow the most, or where people can, which is the easiest. And I think it's also making a difference if the motivation, and we're back to the pandemic, but it's relevant for other changes as well. If it's a change that I want within my heart, or if it's forced upon me.
Right.
And so whether it's a personal change that you want for yourself, where you're saying I want a healthier lifestyle, or I want to spend more time with my family, and this is a wish that comes out of myself, I think the motivation is much higher to change something, and the endurance is much higher than when it's forced on you. And I think that's the same for organizational changes, where you can, as a leader, at least make sure that people understand why we're doing things, and help people make the change their own. So what do we really want to get out of this change? Or is it just because I'm new in this role and I want to prove myself as a new CEO? But I'm not trying to make the difference clear. But why are we putting so much effort into a restructuring? Why is it that we want you on board? Why is it that, what do we think we can get out of it, of the whole change process? Because it's gonna have impact. It's gonna have, it's not always comfortable, or in most situations, it's opening up new challenges and new conflicts and new things to take care of. And so I think people really have to understand why it is important and be part of it to help accelerate the change. So I hope that was a
it makes sense, and I think we can reflect it as well on you look at societies and how they're dealing with things like lockdown, because some people really understand it, but then they're really uncomfortable with their personal freedoms being restricted. And in Germany and the UK, you've got major challenges to government rulings, marches, and in France, you've now got, quite a lot of violence growing. It seems as though at the beginning, everybody's very good, very compliant. We understand the why, we're moving forward. And then suddenly, if it takes too long, it almost feels as though we're too impatient.
Yeah.
And, when I reflect this back onto organizational change, we talk about everything has its stages. Like you said before, Kotter's like, forget Kotter. You haven't got time for an alliance here. This is why. This is what we need to do. So we're not bringing everybody along. And so I think that capacity to change is still there. But depending on your levels of resilience and endurance, I think is dominating which people are adapting and changing really well, and who are those that are maybe struggling. And I think that's true for the individual, it's true for teams. I even think it's maybe true for big organizations and businesses, with regards to those that are thriving during this time and those that are really struggling. So I think the point is very well made.
And I think the parts of Kotter's stages, for example, building alliances, is not over, but it's not checking a box, but it's continuously working on your alliances. And this, and I'm reflecting also on this pandemic. You're dealing with a lot of trust from the citizens and with their rights. And I can only say from the Austrian perspective, we had a lot of trust in our leadership at the beginning, and for many different reasons, it seems to lose, or we seem to lose it. And people grow tired, and people say like, okay, whatever you say, lockdown number 3, 4, 5, I don't care. I'm seeing my family anyway.
Right.
And I think this is really a piece of art to stay credible in a change and hold the tension of where you want to go. And besides everything that is maybe shaking up your plan.
Which is easier to do if you have 20,000 people in your organization. Probably more difficult when you've got 60 million people in the UK, where 30% of them are not compliant at all. Only 20% of them are really struggling with the virus. And then there's 50% in the middle that don't know who to believe, depending on which Facebook feed they get. Talk to me a little about from your own perspective now, like when you're someone going through change, right? You're about to become a mum for the first time. How exciting. You're having to adapt. It's uncertain. I mean, being pregnant during lockdown and all the rules and regulations of how you visit hospitals and get tested, I mean, that's complex and pretty ambiguous. How have you created the right mindset to be able to adapt to your changing environment?
Mhm.
If that's not too personal to throw at you without any preparation of thinking about it.
You know, maybe it's important to know that at the beginning of the pandemic, I was not planning on starting a family, but also I started like a coaching session, not a session. It's a 3 month coaching process that I started, and per accident, it was at the same time like the first lockdown, so I had a lot of time to reflect.
Right, yeah.
And it was really about, okay, now that things are shaking up in such a crazy way, how do I want to get out of this situation? How do I want to live my life? What is important for me? How do I define success for me? Because success for me in the past has been different than it's now. And knowing that, I suddenly came to realize that the only thing holding me back from starting a family is just fear for transformation, fear of change. Because I knew it would shake up my business life, it would shake up my family life, I could endanger my partnership. There were 100 voices in my head saying, don't do this. And I think the great value that my coach in this setting was brought to me was to acknowledge that this is my fears and that this is okay, but still the wish is there. And then I found the courage to just take this step. And it was about doing values work, knowing what is important to me, and knowing how I want to live my life.
Right.
More than exactly knowing what it will be like.
Yeah,
so I know what I want, how I want to experience my life. And now piece by piece, I'm looking for things that fit together with this vision. And I still feel like surfing, and the wave sometimes hits me and I'm struggling to get air and to breathe, but I know that I can crawl back on my surfboard and I have my guides there, and then I can really use again this energy of innovation and newness. And so I'm not through the change, I would say, because I have no idea how it's going to be a mother, and a businesswoman, and a partner, and a friend, and a daughter, and a whatever. But I'm confident, more confident that I'm going to manage this struggle.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing it so poignantly as well, because I think, like, when you talk about it, what really stands out is we can't change unless we audit our values.
Mhm.
We have to know what we stand for. Like, what is it we represent? What's deep within us? You know, if we cut ourselves in half, what's going to come out? Because if you don't honor that, then those fears, which are normal and natural for all of us, everyone has whatever fears they have are totally okay and normal. But you don't overcome them until you do that little assessment, until you audit yourself.
Yeah.
So I love how you explain that you know, you checked your values, you checked your fears, and actually that's what gave you the courage to challenge them. Otherwise, you'd still be telling yourself the same story.
I would grow more impatiently with me every day, but I would still tell myself these stories.
Right.
And so whatever comes out of it, I'm already very grateful for the steps that I've taken and what I could experience, and just swimming in the water.
Yeah. Or spinning, maybe.
Spinning head over the, sometimes you swallow a lot of salty water, but
And normally it's really shallow in the water when you're being twisted by the waves, right? You just,
oh yeah, or you go surfing in Panama and you lose control totally.
okay, so I've not done that, but I know from my own experience when I've been tossed off the board and I find myself spinning in that wave, which, by the way, is one of the most naturally scary things when you just have no concept of whether you're upside down or inside out, right?
Yeah.
But when you do find your feet and you can stand, and I think some of it is just the uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
When you do suddenly stand up, you realize that like you're in waist high water.
Yeah.
And actually it's okay, and it's that grounded feeling, and maybe that's one of the lessons I'm taking away even from that story there is, you know, by understanding who we are, we have the grounding.
Yeah.
Because then everything that you seek, you can draw towards you.
And I think that's also transferable to leaders or to organizations. To really find out what roots you and where you get your stability from and what drives you, what is it that who you are and what you can bring in. Then you will have a probably an easier time going through this crazy pandemic. And I think that's the same for organizations. If they know what they want to deliver to their customers, what they want to, what their values are, what they stand for, it's also easier for people to take the right decisions.
Yeah, I think when you know what your values are, decision making is really simple.
Could be. It's more clear. Maybe it's not easy, but it's clearer.
I would stick with that. Definitely it's clearer, but I speak for myself. When I know what I stand for and what I won't stand for, making decisions has become much easier. Because I know what is a yes and I know what is a no. Whether the direction I take is right and all the questions that can throw up, I totally get. Might not be as simple, right? Nothing is always that simple. But the clarity of what values bring, it's like a moral compass.
Yes.
It creates a compass for decision making.
It is, and I think also in combination with having a purpose of what you want to bring into the society or what your business is really providing, I think it's a strong combination that allows a lot of flexibility and clarity at the same time.
Right, I love that. That idea of purpose, it's something we talk about at CTG a lot, right? With organizations, with teams, you know, what's the purpose? And what's the impact of that purpose? So, you know, not just what is your contribution going to be, but what is the impact of your contribution? So how do you scale it and what is the legacy that you leave behind?
I love this question. What is the legacy that you leave?
Right.
It makes me sweat every time.
Well, you know, you're having those conversations with people right now as you step away from work for a short period of time, right? What's the legacy been? And I think when we can see what that legacy is, obviously it's great, right? But to look forward and try and see what you want the legacy to be can help create and drive what you then go and do. So it's it's like an evolving circle. You've got to start thinking about it at some point, not always at the end game. Otherwise, it was just luck that got you there, or hard work and luck.
True. Yeah.
Valentina, as we kind of move full circle, yeah, exactly. I'd love to kind of end our conversation with a similar question to how we started. So when we started, I said to you, you know, what have you observed in leaders and been learning through this pandemic? As you look forward now, especially with what's to come for you, what do you hope will be some of the behavioral shifts that we can make to help us through into a new world?
Do we have another hour?
Yeah, we can go for another 40 minutes. I give you.
From the top of my head, or maybe not out of my head, out of my heart. I'd say I hope we learn about connectedness. Is that a word even?
Yeah, it is.
How we connect to each other, and what really, if we brush off all the fancy and nice things and the ornaments and so on, what is there that we want to keep, that we have a knowledge about this, and that we find more common or shared ground than to drift apart in the various society parts of society. And I think that's also valued for companies, that we share a common journey. Let's say, call it that way, a common journey. And for me, I think it's staying connected also to the other world, not being thrown into traditional motherhood roles and expectations, but to stay connected to the other reality and to what's out there, and bringing in my purpose, bringing in my values, bringing in what I can deliver, so that my legacy at the end of my beautiful life will be fulfilled.
Well, I love it. I like it. Did really well, because like you answered that in 3 minutes. You didn't even need 40.
Really? And now, when we end our talk, I will sit there and think like, what did you really say and why?
No, well, look, let me reflect it straight back to you, because what I hear you say actually is, one, what this pandemic has given the world actually is an opportunity for global empathy. We can all feel and experience, I know it's a different journey for everybody, but we can experience the same thing at the same time. So we can all be empathic. It can heighten empathy. And if that's the case, then what we can do is we can really lean into, which seems to be a favorite word in the pandemic, but we can really lean into this idea of connectedness. And actually, through connection, we can collaborate much more. And by that connection, whether it's for you as a mum, as a partner, as a daughter, as a colleague, as a professional, as a coach, it's not just about sticking in one zone. Actually, it's that when you talk, what I understood you when you talk about connectedness is, it's like 20 tentacles coming out of you to keep the connection, not minimizing it, but opening it up.
Yeah.
So, and I would echo it. For me, a hope is that we can create, through this digital hyper connection that we have, a deeper sense of connectedness.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about, oh, hey, how are you? Yeah, good. How are you? Yeah, good. Actually, there's a deeper sense of value, of purpose, and those kinds of things, which then enhances everybody's bloody legacy, quite frankly, so that they all start talking and using that language. I think you expressed that poignantly, actually, and as I said, in under 3 minutes. Nice job.
I'm not sure I understood you better than me, but
at least now you know what you said. And if I've helped explain it, what you said back to you, and that's the beauty of being a coach, where I actively listen and then reflect it straight back.
Exactly. That's why you talk to someone, or in the best case, the coach, to have you being understood, and someone filtering this,
all the other
words into something great.
Look, and that's what we do. And anyway, you and I are talking about working together on a coaching program next year anyway. So we'll get to have more conversations. And once you're ready, to introduce your baby to the world, we will have you both come back on lockdown, I hope, and you will introduce us to the mini version of you and Ulrich's baby. Yeah, take a deep breath on that one. Bit of calm. Valentina, thank you so much for your energy, your enthusiasm for development, for people, for the way you describe change, and also from my heart for your honesty as well. I love the poignant way you're able to share some real personal stuff without even blinking. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for talking to me, listening to me, understanding my points. And having this conversation. I enjoyed it.
Good. Listen, take care, be safe, look after that bump inside your belly, and we wish everyone safe arrivals, and we'll be in touch in the new year anyway. But you and I can meet again on another lockdown when you're back in play.
Perfect.
Valentina, enjoy your weekend ahead. Take care, look after yourself. See you soon.